Please remember that the complete information for the class that you are about to view is at elithecomputerguy.com. Not only do we have our videos there, but we have part lists, diagrams, pictures, and even complete code examples. So if you are watching this video and you want more information, please go to elithecomputerguy.com. Welcome back. As you know, I am Eli, the computer guy, and in today's class, I'm going to be showing you how to use FFmpeg on Linux in order to resize and convert your video files. So in the modern world, we are surrounded by video files, but one of the problems that we run into is many times when we go to play those video files on whatever device that we want to use, either it is in a format that that device does not understand, or possibly it's in a size that's just too darn large. You know, some of us, for some stupid reason, have decided to start trying to encode our videos at higher and higher rates. And so, like, if you want to watch one of my videos and you download it, it may be at 1080p, 60 frames per second, and so it may be a very large file, and you don't necessarily want to put that large file onto your smartphone, your iPhone, your mobile device. And you may be sitting there going, if only I had this video, but in simply a smaller size. I don't need 1080p for 60 frames per second. I don't need 4K. 480 is fine. Or possibly, what if you only want an audio file? So a lot of people, you know, they have their favorite content creators that they follow, and their content creators are frankly too lazy to create podcasts. It's true. It's true. So you sit there and you download the video file and like, darn it, why doesn't this person just create audio files to make my life easier? Well, one of the cool things with FFmpeg is it's actually very, very easy to be able to turn video files even just simply to MP3 files, so you can take the content on the road and you can simply listen to it and you don't have to worry about dealing with the full video. So FFmpeg is an incredibly good tool. This is one of those things, don't overthink it. Don't overthink FFmpeg. FFmpeg is incredibly powerful, and it's great because at the command line, basically you only have to put in a couple of commands. You simply do FFmpeg -I for the input, what video file you're inputting, and then you simply say what the name of the output file should be, and then what the extension should be. So basically, if you have an MP4 video file and you want to turn it into a .mov file, you literally just say movie.mov, and it will auto-convert it into a movie file. If you want an audio file, you simply do whatever the name is, .mp3, and it'll turn it into an audio file. So that's one of the cool things about FFmpeg. Not only is it actually really useful, but it is incredibly easy to use. So the warning, Will Robinson, warning for today is before you think FFmpeg has completely screwed the pooch and outloaded a piece of crap that is completely unusable for you, make sure to actually take the video file or the audio file that you've created and actually use it on a different system or the mobile device that you're planning to use it on. So one of the things, whenever I do these demonstrations, I do these demonstrations in a virtual machine on my MacBook Pro. So I have a MacBook Pro, I have VirtualBox, and within VirtualBox, I have an instance of Ubuntu Desktop, and I use that to do a lot of the demonstrations to show you what's going on. Here's a curious thing. I may have not given my Ubuntu desktop operating system very many resources. Again, I didn't want to overload my computer, so I didn't give it very many resources. I haven't optimized it to really be a desktop computer. So one of the curious things is, especially since it's running within virtualization, is when FFmpeg spits out the finished file, and then I try to play it within the virtual machine. It's like, what? What did FFmpeg do? Oh, I thought this was going to be a great product, and it's obviously just garbage. That's not FFmpeg's fault. That's the crappy-ass virtual machine that you're trying to play the finished file on. So one of the things that I would say is, like, what I've done, and I'll show you in the demonstration today, is I've connected to a shared directory on the host machine. So basically, I have the MacBook Pro, then I have VirtualBox. Within VirtualBox, I have Ubuntu Desktop. So for Ubuntu Desktop, I've simply connected to the shared folder on the Mac, and then what I do is I copy and paste the outputted files from the Ubuntu, from the FF FFmpeg into that shared folder on the Mac, and then I open up the video or the audio files in the Mac. So that actually will show me what the files will play like and how they'll actually display on a full-fledged system. So this may be one of the issues that you run into. Again, this is one of those weird things with the Linux world. Linux is great, don't get me wrong. Linux is absolutely a wonderful machine, but especially if you're only using Linux for demonstration purposes, if you're only using it for like projects and lab environments, one of the issues you get into is, again, with some of these types of things where you're used to just being able to very easily consume it on a Windows platform or on a Mac platform. Sometimes in Linux it can be a little bit more difficult, and so one of the issues you may run into is FFmpeg will output something. If you simply go and try to play that outputted file from your Linux, especially a virtual machine, how it may play will be incredibly substandard. That's just something to keep in mind. So it's not necessarily FFmpeg's fault. Take that file, put it somewhere else, put it onto whatever your planned destination is, play it there, see how it works. I would bet you 9 times out of 10 when you do that, you'll realize, oh, that's the issue. So now that you have an idea of what's going on, let's go over to the demonstration computer and I'll show you how FFmpeg works. So we're going to be installing FFmpeg onto the system. I'm going to show you the commands for how to simply convert a file from one format to the other. And then one of the things that I'll do is I'll actually show you how to use a command in order to resize your video files. So this can be an important thing. Again, imagine if you have a 4K video file or a 1080p video file, and you're just simply going to be watching that video file on a little mobile device. If you take that down to something like 480p, that way you may get a fine video file that you can use, but it will be a lot smaller and easier to use. So what I'm going to be showing you how to do today is how to convert the video files and then how to resize the video files. So with that, let's go over to the computer and I'll show you how this works. So here we are at my demonstration machine. Again, I am using a MacBook Pro, and on that I've installed VirtualBox. Within VirtualBox, I have then installed Ubuntu Desktop. I am using 18.04 LTS, but basically any version of Ubuntu should work for you. I am using the graphical user interface, again, the desktop version of Ubuntu, but do realize that FFmpeg is a command line tool, so if you don't need the GUI component, you can run this from just a command line server. Again, if you don't need any of the graphical stuff. So just kind of keep that in mind. So with that, let's log in with my super secret password of 123456. And now we are logged in. Now the first thing I have opened up, I just did want to show this to you, is I have these two folders. And so basically this folder right here, this is the FFmpeg test folder, and it's sitting in my home directory. So these are the examples that I've created playing around to do this particular class, and these are all sitting on this particular Linux machine. Again, one of the issues you run into, though, if you try to double click, if you actually try to open up these files, it's a mess. It's just not good. It's just not good. So one of the things that I did is I connected to the shared folder on my MacBook Pro, so on the host machine. And basically what I did is I copied and pasted these files into that folder on the host machine so that I can then play the files, right? So these are actually on the host machine. And if I go here, I can go to me, you go to public, so what I connected to is the public, and then I can go and basically I can play any of these files that I've pasted there. So if I want to go and want to see this 100, 300, this example that I did, I can simply double click on that. And as we can see, that is actually playing. So again, this is what I would recommend that you do, is that you basically offload the finished files onto some other device before you try to play them. Because again, I don't even want to try to play them on this machine right now because it's just it's just so bad. So anyways, with that, let's get to the terminal. So you click on that little show applications thing down there. If you don't have it showing up, you then type in terminal up at the top and you hit enter. Once you're here, the first thing that we're going to need to do is actually install FFmpeg. FFmpeg is a well-known tool, so it is in the standard repository. So we can simply do sudo apt get install FFmpeg. Make sure I don't misspell that. Hit enter. Password is 123456. We hit enter, and now it's going to go through, and it's going to install anything. For FFmpeg, there's no configuration files. There's no real settings for you to modify. Basically, this is just a command line utility. You feed it commands, you feed it options, and it will do what you want. So with that, let's clear the screen. First thing we need to do is make sure what directory we're in. So pwd. So we are on the Bob's home directory. Then ls-l to see what files and folders are here. And so the folder that we want to go into, this has our examples, is FFmpeg test. So we're going to go into cd, FFmpeg, uppercase T-E-S-T, and now we're in there. Once we're in there, we can do ls-l. And now we have all of these different files. So these are all the different examples that I've created. Now, I'm not actually going to run through and actually do the examples for you because it takes a long time to do. Again, one of the things to be thinking about is it's actually going to have to encode the video files, which means it's going to have to essentially open up one video file, read the information from that video file, and then save it in the new format to a different video file. And that can actually take a substantial amount of time. So that's one thing to realize. This is not a copy and paste routine here. This is not a 3-second routine. Basically, you're going to plug in whatever the code is, whatever you want to do is, and then go grab a cup of coffee. So that's an important thing to realize. So let's say with this, let's say I wanted to do things with this vid1.mp4 file, and that's actually what I did in order to create all these different demonstrations. Let me clear the screen. And so the first thing, if all I want to do is modify or basically convert the MP4 file into a different format, all you have to do in order to do that is FFmpeg. Then you do space -I. So this is the input. What is the input file? So we're going to say vid1.mp4. So that's one of the files that's there. And then literally, all you have to do is give a name and give an extension for the output file you want. So you could just simply put output file. So you can name this whatever you want. And then if you wanted this to be a MOV movie, that's literally all you have to do. So this calls FFmpeg. The input, it asks what the input is. You say the input is vid1. .mp4, and the output file is, you got to be whatever the name is, .mov, and this will literally simply convert the mp4 to an mov file. The cool part is, again, the cool part with this, and this might be very useful for you, is simply by doing this, by simply doing mp3, that will literally turn the video file into an audio file so that you can play it. So again, if we go down here, literally that's what I did. So I have this audio.mp3 file. And that's all I did. So I typed this exact command in. I simply did audio.mp3, and the result was...
Welcome back. As you know, I am Eli, the computer guy, and in today's class, I'm going to be showing you how to use a Linux tool called JPEG Optim.
So you can see that then gives you the audio file. So again, if you want to listen to things in your car or whatever else, that's an easy way to get the audio file. So that's the basic way to simply, if all you want to do is convert your video file into a different file format, again, .mov, .mp3, .avi possibly, whatever else, this is literally the only command you have to worry about. Now, the next thing that you can play around with is then resizing your video file. So this can be very important if you're going to be putting video files up online. So again, what if you're one of these people that's scared that YouTube is going to die? YouTube is going to die! YouTube is going to die! I need to have my own website and be able to distribute my own video content. Well, one of the things is, if you try to distribute your own video content, you're going to find out the problems of trying to distribute 1080p video files, especially if you're not, pretty good in the technical realm and understand how streaming services and all that work. So one of the things that you may want to do is, at least for the time being, what you could do is you might want to shrink your video files. So you're like, okay, well, I have 1080p files, but those are too large for me to put on my website easily. So what if I just shrink down the size of those files so that they're easier to embed on my website just as normal files, and then later I'll figure out how to do the streaming service. Or if you want to get more complicated, and we'll talk about this in another video, you could actually create your own script for multi-bit rate switching. So FFmpeg would take the original file, it would encode it to 1080p, and it would encode it to 720p, and it would encode it to 480p, and it would encode it to 144, and it would encode it to audio, and then using a modern streaming server and a player, basically what's called a video player, you could do something called multi-bit rate switching, where the video player and the streaming server, they can communicate with each other, figure out what the most appropriate video file is to send to the end user based off of the bandwidth and the speed, and then it will be able to flip through those different versions. So basically I'm going to show you how to resize a video today. So the first thing to do, if you want to resize a video file, is simply we're going to do what we have here. So let's say we have FFmpeg, the input of vid1.mp4. And then after that, we're just going to use a couple of things. So that the two options that we need is verbose and force. So basically what this is going to do is the V you may not need, is just going to tell us what's going on. But the force is to actually force the file to be shrunk to whatever size we're going to give it. So with that, we're then simply going to say scale equals, and then we're going to do width and height. So for a 240, this will be 352 by 240. So this will give us 240p. And then we simply put the output dot mp4, let's say. Right? So basically what this is going to do, we call FFmpeg. We then say what the input is. The input is going to be this video file. Then we're going to say verbose force, and then we're going to give it a scale. The scale is going to be 352 wide by 240 tall, and then we're going to output it to this particular file. And so then we will get that smaller output. So if we go over and we look at some of the examples that I've created, let's say here, so I created a 320 example. So if I open up vid1, so vid1 was the original video file. And if we take a look here, we can see that's 305 megs, right? So I open this up and we can see, okay, this is more or less the type of video file that you're used to looking at, right? But you're like, well, I'd like something to be a little smaller. Again, if this is showing up pretty nice on a MacBook Pro display, and I think my viewers are going to be watching this on their little iPhones, then I don't necessarily need a 300 meg file. So what I did is I created a 320 version here. So the 320 version, you'll see this is only 23 megs. And then if you look at the resolution, now it's pretty pixelated.
Welcome back.
Again,
I am Eli, the computer guy, and in today's class...
So the audio still sounds fine, but you can now see that it is much more pixelated. Now, if I shrink this down, again, imagine if I shrink that down to that size, so imagine that's now on a smartphone, that may look a little better. If I wanted to make it even smaller than that, I created this 100 pixel cross version. That goes down to 18.5 megs. So think about that. That's a video file. It's a video file. It's a crappy video file. It's 18.5 megs. Oh, if I open that up, it's a video file.
Welcome back. As you know, I am Eli, the computer guy, and in today...
I mean, you may feel drunk watching it, but I don't know. Maybe there's a purpose for this. But anyways, this is where you can go through and you can figure out, again, for the device, how you think people are going to be consuming it. You figure out what resolution is best, and then you figure out what size constraints you're dealing with, and you can shrink it down. Now, here's one of the issues, though. One of the issues you get with this scale is what if you don't know what these numbers should look like? So 240p. So 240p means 352 wide, right? So you actually have to go do a little Google research to make sure you know what the scale should look like. Because one of the issues you run into if you plug in these numbers manually, like I've done here, is you can get something weird. So I did this 100 by 300. So basically what I did here for the scale is I did 100 wide by 300 tall, just to show you what a mistake might look like. And if I click on this,
Welcome back. As you know, I am Eli.
This is literally the video file, right? So if I increase the size, well, I actually can't increase the size of the player. It's kind of stuck that way, right? And so that's one of the issues you can get into when you're trying to manually scale your video file, is you could just screw it up. Now this is obvious. Like if you do 100 by 300, that's very obvious. You know there's a problem. But one of the issues you get into with this is what if you just screw this up a little bit, right? So you do 240 240. What if you do 240 by like 340 or something? You know, one of those where, oh, it's off, the aspect ratio is off, but it's not off by that much. And then you're looking at it and you're like, oh, this doesn't seem right, but it's not bad enough to really know what the problem is. You can run into that kind of issue. So one of the things that you can do is if you want to keep the aspect ratio, but like you just want to put in the width. So let's say I know what I want the width to be, but I'm not really sure to keep the aspect ratio proper. I'm not sure what the height should be. One of the things I can do here, oops, before. I'm used to using the mouse. Let me scroll back. One of the things I can do here is I can do -1. So basically what this -1 does is it says keep the aspect ratio. So however tall and wide it currently is, when we shrink it down to 352, then keep the aspect ratio for the height. So this might be very important now, especially with people creating video content with many different devices. Like with a lot of the devices people are using now, the aspect ratios aren't necessarily the same. So for a while there, we were all using the same aspect ratios for our video files, and so you can manually plug in aspect ratios, and more or less, horseshoes and hand grenades, you'd be fine. Well, one of the issues, though, is sometimes when we're creating video files now, we're creating square video files. Sometimes when we're creating video files, we're creating horizontal or vertical. Anyways, vertical versus horizontal, whatever, right? So we're doing video files in different ways now. And so one of the problems is if somebody gives you a square video file and you don't realize it, and then you scale it manually, so you actually plug in the specific numbers how you think they should be, the result that you may get may be the equivalent of this, maybe a hell of a lot closer to this than what you're looking for. So one of the cool things here is you can do this. So scale equals, so this is whatever the width is, then you do colon, and then you simply do -1, and then what that does is that will keep the aspect ratio. So in order to do this, you do have to make sure you have these options, -VF, again, verbose and force, and then this will scale your video file and keep the aspect ratio. So that's a basic demonstration of how this works. Again, if you want to see, just to see why I'm not going to actually show everything to you, if I hit enter now, we can see that once I actually start the process, basically this is literally what you're going to be seeing for however long it takes. Again, very important thing to understand, the longer or the bigger your video file is, the longer this process will take, and the fewer resources your machine has, the longer this process will take. So again, if you have a large video file and you're running this in a crappy virtual machine, it may take forever to encode a video. So if you're playing around with FFmpeg, I would highly recommend, even if you have high resolution videos, make them short. So like 1 minute of high resolution video so that it doesn't take forever to actually process those video files when you're playing around with it. But that's really how FFmpeg works. So there you go. Now you know how to use FFmpeg in order to convert and resize your video files. Again, in this modern world, there is so much video content out there. And again, one of the big problems that we all run into is how to take that video content and then actually turn it into a format that we can use. Possibly the video file you have is in a format that your computer or your device can't play. So possibly like an FLV, like a Flash video file from years ago. That's how I originally encoded my video files, 10.5 years ago. So maybe you have a bunch of FLV files and you want to turn them into MP4 files and you're not really sure how to do it. FFmpeg can do that for you. Again, let's say you're like, wow, I really like this particular content creator, but I want to listen to them while I'm driving in the car. And even though I have a mobile device and I can play a video file on the mobile device, playing video files on mobile devices is different than audio files, right? With an audio file, you can have it play while you're doing other things. It doesn't take up everything on your mobile device the way a video file does. And so this way you could download a video file. Simply, all you do is, again, you do FFmpeg space hyphen I for the input. You give the video file space and then whatever you want the name to be, and simply .mp3, and that is literally all you have to do in order to turn that video file into an audio file, and now away you go. Again, one of the things to be thinking about when we're thinking about command line in the Linux world, this is useful as just a one-off tool, but where this becomes very powerful is when you start using this in scripts for things like your servers. So again, basically, you can come up with something where you dump 100 or 1,000 video files into one directory, and then you create a script so that your server just sits there and knocks through and processes all those video files to output whatever it is that you want. Again, where this becomes very valuable as like a systems administrator type thing, if you're thinking about infrastructure, is if you're going to be distributing video content, this is how you're able to create multiple quality video files if you're going to be doing something called multi-bit rate switching. So if you're watching this video on YouTube or you're watching this video on Vimeo, right? Depending on what your internet speed is, YouTube or Vimeo or whatever site will determine the best quality video file to present to you. So there's actually numerous different video files. So you have a 1080p version, a 720p version, a 480p version, a 360p version, a 144p version, and maybe an audio version, right? And so what happens is with these modern web browser video players, they're able to communicate back with a streaming server. They figure out what the internet speed is, and then basically they figure out what is the best video file to present to the end user, right? Okay, so this person has a very fast ISP connection, they get 1080p. Oh, this person's a little bit slower, well, then we'll give this person a 320p. How you can make this whole process a lot easier to actually implement is, again, if you come up with a script, you basically upload your high quality video file into some directory, your server then picks up that video file, it then converts that video file into 2, 3, 7 different versions. I think like Netflix uses like 10 different versions for how they do multi-bit rate switching. So you create however many versions you want, and then you can have the whole infrastructure work that way. So again, FFmpeg is a very valuable and useful tool just for one-off, again, literally typing in the command line and going for it. But where it becomes really, really cool is once you start using these scripts for servers, and you can start to do a lot of fancy stuff. So as always, I enjoy doing this class and look forward to seeing you at the next one. If you like the content that I create, please think about going to elithecomputerguy.com and becoming a member or donating. Please understand that all of the educational videos are in front of the paywall. That includes the videos, that includes the notes, the diagrams, and the code example. All of that is freely available and in front of the paywall. But if you want to watch opinion videos or if you want to be able to comment, you do need to become a member. Membership is $5 a month or $60 a year and gives you access to those opinion videos and the ability to comment. If you don't want to become a member, you just want to give a one-time donation, there's also a donate button where you can do that. Please understand, in order to provide the education that I am, it does cost money. Servers cost money, equipment costs money, travel costs money. All of these things cost a reasonable amount of money, and the fact of the matter is YouTube's advertising program no longer supports creators the way that it used to. So if you want these classes to continue to stick around and you find them to be valuable, please think about either becoming a monthly member or donating a few dollars for this project.